Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. Gordon Chang, my colleague, friend, and co-host is here. We begin with a bizarre story from the end of 2013 that needs explication. You might have seen in the rumor mill, rumor, that Kim Jong-un, the criminal leading the criminal regime in North Korea, ordered or demanded or in some fashion allowed the execution of his uncle, his sister's wife, in a fashion that sounds medieval, torn apart by dogs, consumed by dogs with 300 people watching. There were various versions of this. The uncle's guilty of being the perpetrator of the regime, which Kim Jong-un is also guilty of. Gordon, rumor. That's where we have on this, right? Rumor.
It is rumor. It has been reported, though, by Wenwei Bo, which is a newspaper in Hong Kong that often carries stories at the direction of the Communist Party in Beijing. So it is interesting because it may shed a light on what people in the Chinese capital are thinking about North Korea. But you're right, this is rumor and is probably not true.
We welcome Bruce Bechtol, our colleague, the author most recently of The Last Days of Kim Jong-il. Bruce is a very long-standing North Korea watcher through these Kim regimes and their bizarre behavior, including setting off nuclear weapons and launching missiles that fall very close to Japan towards the United States and mass murdering millions of people in their death camps. Generally, the perpetrators of the sort of thing you associate with the devils of the 20th century. Here they are in the 21st, tolerated by the Chinese regime, not tolerated by the rest of the world, but then what is to be done? And so we welcome Bruce, not only to explain this rumor of the dogs and the execution of the uncle, who is dead. The uncle is dead in some fashion, but also all of these strange stories about North Korea and Kim Jong-un. How does it benefit the dictators? Bruce, a very good evening to you. The strange story for the moment is an aging basketball player who keeps going to North Korea, singing songs, taking money, the behavior of foolishness. But how does that help Kim Jong-un, this man who murdered his uncle in some fashion? How does the rumor of the dogs help Kim Jong-un? Good evening to you, Bruce.
Good evening to you, both John and Gordon. I'm so honored to be on your show again. Well, I think the story of the dogs, I think Gordon probably hit the nail on the head. It came out in a paper that is many times a mouthpiece of the Communist Party in China, and it may not be true. In fact, it's likely not true. So I'm not sure it benefits anybody but the Chinese government, which right now is trying to, in many ways, perhaps, even though it's factionalized, put down the many evil things that Kim Jong-un has done. And I would like to point out that, they really didn't have to put something like this out anyway, because the way that it appears Kim Jong-un actually killed his uncle was almost as grisly, and that's him and several of his subordinates, that is to say Zhang Zhangtek, were put in front of a firing squad that used anti-aircraft machine guns with armor-piercing shells. In other words, literally, the machine guns would tear the bodies apart. And, that's almost as grisly as being torn apart by dogs, although I guess it's not quite as Roman Empire sounding. So we may never know how he was really killed, but I think what's important for us to remember is that he's just one of many who were purged and executed over recent months because of what appears to be turmoil and instability in the North Korean government.
I just want you to add, how does the basketball player, all of this nonsense, does that help Kim Jong-un? How does it help him?
Well, I think that's a great point, John, and I think it does help Kim Jong-un, because when Dennis Rodman goes over there and gets all the attention from all of our press, from our mainstream press, and is shown, cavorting and playing basketball with the North Koreans, people are looking at that and talking about it or joking about it, and they're not talking about the human rights violations the North Koreans engage in, the military brinksmanship, and the hardships that they put on their own people. So I think it actually benefits the Kim Jong-un government to be able to get Dennis Rodman over there.
Well, Bruce, to amplify this, you have been talking about something which is really critically important, and that is that Chun Sun-tak, the official who was executed, has supporters throughout this regime, from Pyongyang, the capital, all the way down to these municipalities, and that now his allies have got to make a decision. They know that they can be killed or sent to the camps. They've got to either fight or flee, and here comes Dennis Rodman, and he sort of gives Kim Jong-un, the ruler, the appearance of, oh, everything is stable and normal, whereas the regime probably is anything but.
Absolutely. And, we're able to get kind of a glimpse into what's going on in the purges, which are still ongoing, by the way, because Chang Sang-tek had so much power over the foreign service. And so we've seen literally several diplomats, ambassadors to Sweden, to Malaysia, to the United Nations, even to UNICEF, called back to North Korea under guard, seen called back under guard to get on Air Koryo Airlines. So we know that's going on. And because of that, we can just assess that there's all kinds of things related to that going on at the state, provincial, and city level. In fact, I saw a report 2 days ago that was talking about the fact that several hundred people who were related by both blood and marriage to Chang Sang-tek were hauled away, stuck on a train, and sent off to North Hamgyong province on the Chinese border. So again, we're seeing that, and all that's doing, Gordon, is creating yet more turmoil within the governmental infrastructure of North Korea.
And it's not only turmoil inside the regime itself. You had Chun Sun-tak, is the official who probably had the best links to Beijing. He's gone. And so all these business relationships, investment relationships between North Korea and China are now in jeopardy. This is very interesting because I'm sure the leaders in Beijing do not want to be demonized as they have by state media in North Korea. So this has international implications as well.
Absolutely, Gordon. And I would assess, although you're much more of an expert on this than I am, I would assess that that's going to hurt what, as we all know, is the most important economic relationship North Korea has, and that's with China. So it almost seems counterintuitive that Kim Jong-un did this execution and the mass purgings, but what it means is, for us who are observing it, he must have really had a fear that Chang Sang-tek was a real linear threat towards him and the Kim family at large.
The Chinese bosses who had the relationship with the dead man, Chang, what happens to them now, Bruce? Do we know? Is that part of the mystery here?
Well, that's a great question. Gordon could probably answer that better than me, but I would say, the Chinese were probably just as shocked by this as the Americans were. They may have known about it quicker, but I doubt if they were expecting this. So there may be some, I would guess, there may be some movement of officials around to kind of placate the North Koreans. But what makes this all the more difficult for the Chinese is I don't think they know the real reasons Chang was purged. We certainly don't. All that we know for sure is that he was purged because likely Kim Jong-un felt he presented a threat to the Kim family regime.
Gordon, I want to make sure I have this Kim Jong-un correct. This is a nobody. This is a puppy. They threw him into the ring, and he was expected to sink or swim. Did we expect him to turn into a monster? Is this a chair that just magically takes an idiot and turns them into Stalin Jr.?
Well, this is the nature of the regime. And, we'd like to think, when Kim Jong-un took over in December 2011, he was young, he was educated in the West. We thought maybe there could be reform. I didn't think so. Bruce didn't think so, because it's the nature of the regime that changes the person, that forces that person to act in certain ways to survive in a very difficult environment in Pyongyang.
Bruce Bechtol. Bruce Bechtol is the author most recently of The Last Days of Kim Jong-il. Need an update there, Bruce, with the dog picture. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. I'm John Batchelor.